Hello my friends, I am so glad you are here today. Take a slow breath and let your shoulders drop. Make yourself comfortable, wherever you are right now. Let this story begin. Picture a small town in southern Germany, somewhere in the year 1884. A father is kneeling on the floor of a modest sitting room, and his 5-year-old son is sitting cross-legged in front of him, eyes wide open, lips slightly parted. The father has just handed the boy a small compass, a simple tool with a thin needle that spins and always comes to rest pointing in the same direction. The boy turns the compass left. The needle moves. He turns it right. The needle moves again. He holds it upside down, tilts it sideways, shakes it gently in his small palm, and every single time, without fail, the needle finds its way back to north. The boy stares at it for so long that his father eventually stands up and walks away. But the boy doesn't move. He cannot. Something has just happened inside him that he has no words for yet. He has just felt, for the very first time, that the world is full of invisible forces, and he wants to understand every single one of them. This is the story of Albert Einstein, a man whose name became a symbol for genius itself. But his story did not begin with brilliance or awards or recognition. It began with a compass, with silence, with a child who thought differently from everyone around him, and with a world that spent years telling him he was not enough. Albert Einstein was born on March 14, 1879, in the small town of Ulm in Germany. His father, Hermann Einstein, was a tradesman who worked with electrical equipment. His mother, Pauline, was a homemaker who loved music and books. When Albert was born, there was nothing in the room to suggest that this baby would one day reshape how humanity understands the universe. In fact, quite the opposite. His head was unusually large, and his family worried quietly whether he would develop normally. He did not speak his first words until he was nearly 3 years old. While other children around him chattered and played, Albert sat in silence, watching the world with enormous, patient eyes. His family called him the quiet one. But he was not quiet because he was slow. He was quiet because he was always thinking. He was observing. He was turning things over in his mind, the way another child might turn a toy in their hands, examining every angle, looking for something hidden inside. School, when it came, was a disaster. Albert did not fit. The classrooms of late 19th century Germany were places where obedience was prized above everything else. Children were expected to sit still, memorize what they were told, and repeat it back without question. Albert could not do this. He asked too many questions. He wanted to understand why things were true, not merely that they were true. His teachers found him frustrating and difficult. One of them looked him in the face and told him directly that he would never amount to anything in life. Think about that for a moment. A grown man, a person of authority, telling a child that his future was already decided, and it was empty. Albert struggled with languages, with rote learning, with the rigid machinery of formal education. But there was one subject that felt to him not like a subject at all, but like a living world he could step inside. Mathematics. He called it the language of the universe. While other children dreaded equations, Albert experienced them the way a musician experiences a melody, as something beautiful and logical and deeply satisfying. His uncle Jacob helped feed this love. He used to tell Albert that mathematics was like a treasure hunt, where every problem was a clue leading to something waiting to be discovered. That image stayed with Albert for the rest of his life. When Albert was 15, his family's financial situation collapsed. His father's business failed, and the family moved to Italy, leaving Albert behind in Germany to finish school. He was alone, miserable, and increasingly unable to tolerate the rigid atmosphere around him. Eventually, He made a decision that shocked everyone who knew him. He left school. Without finishing. Without a qualification. Without a clear plan. He simply walked away, because staying felt like being buried alive. Many people in his life shook their heads. They said he had ruined his future. They said he would regret it. But Albert began to teach himself, reading science and philosophy, and mathematics alone, following his own curiosity wherever it led. This was a young man who had been told he would fail, and who responded by deciding to educate himself on his own terms. At 16, he wrote his very first scientific paper. It was rough and imperfect, but it crackled with something real. He applied to a prestigious engineering school in Switzerland, the Swiss Federal Polytechnic in Zurich. He failed the entrance examination. He was not strong enough yet in literature and languages. Many people would have stopped there. Albert did not stop. He spent another year preparing, working on his weaknesses, refusing to let one closed door mean the journey was over. He tried again. This time, he passed. Switzerland opened something in Albert that Germany had kept locked. The schools were freer, the atmosphere more open. Students were encouraged to think, to question, to form their own ideas. For the first time in his academic life, Albert felt something close to belonging. It was also in Zurich where he met Mileva Morit, the only woman in his physics class. She was brilliant, serious, and deeply committed to science in a world that told women they had no place there. The two of them became inseparable, spending long evenings discussing theories, arguing over ideas, dreaming together of the discoveries they might one day make. Albert once wrote to her that together they would conquer the world of science. He meant every word. But graduation brought a new kind of difficulty. Albert earned his degree in 1900, and then spent the next 2 years unable to find work. He applied to universities, hoping to teach or research. He was rejected, again and again. His professors had not warmed to him during his studies, and they did not write him the recommendations he needed. He was 21 years old, qualified and curious and burning with ideas, and the world had no place for him. In 1902, he finally found a position, though not the one he had imagined. He became a clerk at the patent office in Bern, Switzerland. His job was to read through applications for new inventions and decide whether they were genuinely original. It had nothing to do with physics. It had nothing to do with his dreams. But Albert did something remarkable. Instead of allowing disappointment to swallow him, he made peace with where he was. He called the patent office his thinking laboratory. Every spare moment, every quiet hour between applications, he filled with his own work. He scribbled calculations in notebooks. He turned questions over in his mind that no one else was asking. He lived simply, married Mileva in 1903, and held his life together with the kind of quiet determination that never looks dramatic from the outside, but is, in fact, the most difficult kind of strength there is. And then came 1905. Albert Einstein was 26 years old. He was still a patent clerk. He had no university position, no laboratory, no official standing in the world of science. And in that single year, he published 4 scientific papers that changed everything. One explained how light behaves not only as a wave, but also as a stream of tiny particles, a discovery that would eventually win him the Nobel Prize. Another proved, mathematically, that atoms are real, which had been disputed by scientists for years. But it was the third paper, and the fourth, that would carry his name forever. He introduced the special theory of relativity, which overturned centuries of assumptions about the nature of time and space, and from that theory came a small, perfect equation. E equals mc squared. Energy and matter, it said, are two faces of the same thing. The universe, at its deepest level, works differently from anything anyone had imagined. The scientific world did not know what to do with him. This was not a professor at a famous university. This was a young man in a government office in a Swiss city, writing in the margins of his official work, turning the foundations of physics upside down with nothing but a pen and an extraordinary mind. Things began to change slowly, and then all at once. Scientists started reading his papers. Universities started paying attention. Albert was offered a teaching position, and then another. By 1914, he had been invited to Berlin to join the Prussian Academy of Sciences, one of the most prestigious scientific institutions in the world. He was 34 years old, and the journey from the boy with the compass to the scientist in Berlin had taken every ounce of everything he had. But the world was changing in darker ways. The First World War broke out that same year. Albert, surrounded by colleagues who supported the war, refused to add his name to their declarations. He believed in peace with a conviction that was not fashionable and not safe. He spoke openly against violence at a time when speaking openly was dangerous. This was a pattern that would continue for the rest of his life. Albert Einstein the scientist and Albert Einstein the human being were impossible to separate. His marriage to Mileva eventually ended in 1919, the same year that something extraordinary happened. British scientists traveled to observe a solar eclipse with the specific purpose of testing Albert's general theory of relativity, the extended version of his 1905 work, which described how gravity itself could bend the path of light. The results confirmed his theory completely. Overnight, the news swept across the world. Albert Einstein became the most famous scientist alive. Newspapers printed his name on their front pages. Ordinary people who had never read a word of physics looked up at the sky and thought about space and time differently because of a man they had never met. He was treated, suddenly and bewilderingly, like a celebrity. Albert handled fame the way he handled everything else, with curiosity and a kind of gentle amusement. He continued to live simply. He did not own a car. He wore the same old clothes. He loved to sail, though he was not a strong swimmer. He played the violin late at night, when his thoughts were too full for words. He remarried to a woman named Elsa, and settled into a life that was full of work and travel and the endless, restless turning of ideas in his mind. Through the 1920s he traveled the world, lecturing in Japan and the United States and across Europe, sharing his ideas and inspiring a generation of younger scientists who would carry physics further than even he could see. He used his fame to speak for those who had no voice. He advocated for peace. He spoke out against racism and prejudice. He used every platform he was given to say things that needed to be said, even when they were uncomfortable. And then darkness arrived. In 1933, the Nazi Party rose to power in Germany. Albert was Jewish, and the new government named his work as dangerous and un-German. They burned his books. They threatened his life. Albert had been on a trip abroad when the Nazis came to power, and he understood immediately that he could never go back. He settled in Princeton, New Jersey, at the Institute for Advanced Study, and he built a new life in a new country. He became an American citizen in 1940. He was grateful for the safety. But he never forgot what he had lost, or what was happening to the people he had left behind. The years of the Second World War brought a new and terrible weight. The same equation that had revealed something beautiful about the structure of the universe, E equals mc squared, had also laid the groundwork for nuclear weapons. When the atomic bomb was used against Japan in 1945, Albert was devastated. He had not built the bomb. He had played no direct role. But he understood the chain of ideas that had made it possible, and he spent the rest of his life speaking and writing against nuclear weapons, against war, against the misuse of knowledge that had once been, for him, pure and innocent and full of wonder. He kept working until the very end. He kept asking questions. He was chasing a single great theory that would unify all the forces of nature into one elegant truth, and he never finished it. Perhaps no one has yet. On April 18, 1955, Albert Einstein died at the age of 76. He had asked that there be no ceremony, no monument, no place where people could gather to worship him. He wanted to remain, in some essential way, just a man who had once held a compass and could not stop wondering why the needle always found its way home. Now I want to speak with you for a moment, not about physics or history, but about you, because I think there is something in this story that belongs to all of us. Think about what Albert Einstein endured. He was the child who did not speak. He was the student his teachers dismissed. He was the graduate who could not find work. He was the clerk who was invisible to the world, while his greatest ideas were forming in secret. None of it looked promising from the outside. None of it looked like the beginning of something extraordinary. And yet it was. Maybe sometimes English feels like that cramped school in Germany, where the rules made no sense, and the teachers did not see what you were capable of. Maybe you have been studying for a long time, and the words still feel heavy and foreign in your mouth. Maybe you have failed a test, or struggled to understand something that seemed simple for others, or felt like giving up on a difficult day. I want you to know that I see you, and I want you to know that what you are doing right now, sitting here, listening, trying, refusing to stop, is exactly what the boy with the compass did. You are following a curiosity that no one else can see yet. You are building something invisible that will one day be very real. Every sentence you understand is a small discovery. Every new word you hold onto is a force you have learned to name. And one day, you will look back at where you started, and you will barely recognize how far you have come. Just as Albert looked back at the patent office, at the school that failed him, at the compass in his 5-year-old hand, and saw that all of it had been necessary. All of it had been leading somewhere. So keep listening. Keep learning. Keep going. Your story is still being written, and there are many more journeys waiting here. This is Talewise English.